I I've tried to record this video a couple times and I just can't really put it into words of how utterly shocked I am of this release. This really shocks me because of how much of a colossal failure it is. And I have put down in the Discord, I believe it was yesterday, that I didn't really have any expectations for this album, but I was more than open to being impressed and to be excited for Roddy Ricch's glow up because he has climbed these steps to probably the peak at this point now to being on Donna and Pure Souls. And Please Excuse Me for Being Antisocial is an incredible trap album, and it showcases the incredible qualities that Roddy Ricch has when it comes to vocal inflections, when it comes to really catchy melodies, personal content, and also great beat selection. Please Excuse Me for Being Antisocial has amazing production, and you would be surprised how amazing it sounds on vinyl. But if you took all of the interesting and intriguing qualities that Please Excuse Me had, and if you were to put it into the context of Live Life Fast, it's like taking those qualities and turning them on the flip side, basically in an opposite world where it sounds disgustingly awful. And there is very little redeeming qualities on this album. I can say that the intro is nice. It has elegant instrumental, elegant strings. It does set off the album nice. But when you listen to the album the whole way through, you're going to notice a big problem of this album seems incredibly directionless and disjointed. Another good track that I have on here is Hibachi is a decent track, and Pay My Dues with Takeoff. Those are probably the highlights of the album. And of course, Late at Night's been out for a while, and that is a highlight as well. But amongst this track listing of 18 songs, 50 minutes, you wouldn't think it's not the worst, but with this album, it drags incredibly. And the reason why that it drags so much is the very samey production and the very samey instruments that are being used. If we go back to the intro, that does have the strings and it does have the orchestral elements that we saw in actually previous albums, when you think of War Baby especially, that really tackle that so much better than this. And we get a lot of those things sprinkled throughout this album where it sounds very samey. And it has kind of the same problem that Polo G's Hall of Fame does, where it likes to use kind of like broken guitars, I guess you would put it as, and broken strings. It really likes, like Roddy and all these trap artists now seem to like the broken string instrumental. And it does sound great, and I really appreciate it when it's executed correctly and it's executed very well. But on this, and especially it's executed a few times, it really starts to bog down the album where a 50-minute listen becomes a total slog. And another really negative quality that this album has, which I talked about already, is the vocal inflections. And Roddy has this a really incredible way of making these really odd vocal inflections and melodies that may not sound all that appealing if another artist did it, but he finds this really unique way of making it sound really catchy and very easy to sing along to. And I don't know if it's maybe there's not a lot of vocal processing, a lot of vocal mixing or vocal edits onto his voice that maybe we would have saw on Please Excuse Me for Being Antisocial. But whenever he goes high on his melodies, it sounds very nasally. It sounds very just unfinished and bad. And it sounds incredibly it sounds just not finished and well. And we've seen on Please Excuse Me for Being Antisocial where these high vocal melodies, they sound so good and they sound so catchy, and it really elevates that track to the next level when you go that higher octave, and it works flawlessly. On here, it sounds nasally, it sounds scratchy at some points, and it just really doesn't work. And another issue that I have, just to the album as a whole, it just sounds incredibly unfinished. There are multiple examples on this album, and I'm trying to think of one track in particular, but some of the rhymes and some of the lines sound incredibly disjointed. And I can think of one line where it's like Givenchy on her toes and jewelry and all this kind of stuff. And then it transitions into, let's just say the last line of the line is like toes. It rhymes with toes again, so it rhymes toes twice. And then the third line rhymes to sex. That's the last line of the bar. And it sounds so strange because the beat drops after that word. And then the next line comes and it does match with the last line of like the sex part, and it does rhyme with that part, but it sounds so disjointed that it doesn't work. It doesn't mesh well. And there's even some weird like, I don't know, there's some weird audio things going on with this thing too. Like if we think of BB's interlude, where the voicemail, well, there's the criticism there. It sounds like a voicemail just being put to a microphone. And it's weird that the BB's interludes is one of the more interesting parts of this album, but it's terrible quality. And I'm thinking as well, when More Than a Trend also has some really cheap production and really cheap drums. It's just, it seems that this album is incredibly rushed and incredibly unfinished. And this album in general just does not have a direction. And it's just really odd. Like, because we start off with Live Life Fast, which starts with a really good intro. And then we go through just kind of the typical track listing of a trap album. And then we get to, I believe it is No Way, that has Jamie Foxx on it. And Jamie Foxx doesn't even sing on it. He doesn't really contribute anything. He just tells Roddy Ricch, is like, sometimes you gotta slow it down, like Luther Vandross, and making these subtle like references to like slow jams from Kanye's The College Dropout. That's another thing. It seems that Roddy is very pumped that he was on Donda, and I don't blame him. But it makes it sound, it's just really odd, and it doesn't really mesh well considering of how poor quality this album is. But basically, Jamie Foxx tells him to slow it down, and then it does slow down for like one song, and then it goes to Murder One with 504, and it just gets really hype again. And it's just a directionless album, and I don't know, you had so much time to craft this album. People were so excited, and you just rushed this to death. It sounds incredibly rushed considering how long we've had this thing and how long we've been waiting for it. But I don't know how you do this where it sounds so rushed and it just sounds so incredibly just disjointed and directionless and just terrible. There is the few tracks that I mentioned, but then there's the features as well that do bring a nice bit of kind of change up to the sound. But even then, they do not bring most of their A game besides 504 and besides maybe Gunna. Those two probably bring the best features on the album, and it's nice to see that someone is trying on Roddy Ricch's album, and the worst part of this album is Roddy Ricch. And I hate ragging on Roddy Ricch because I think he still has incredible potential. I think he has the potential to make another classic trap album if he really wants to. But this album is not it. This album, if I made that worst rap albums of the year, if I would have made that a week later, I think this probably would have been on my honorable mentions at least. Maybe even number 5. And Khaled may have gone off that list, honestly. Because this is just a colossal screw-up. And I think you can redeem this. I think you can salvage this and work on something that is much more better quality. But my biggest fear is that I hope that Please Excuse Me was a one-album wonder. That we are not seeing a huge decline in an artist that had a lot of wasted potential and put out material that really was below the potential grade that he could get. So to put it into a sentence or some kind of statement, Live Life Fast is terrible. Live Life Fast is a colossal failure, and I expect so much better. Now I'm going to go back to enjoying my albums and to enjoy some good music and to enjoy my top 10 albums of the year, which will be dropping on Saturday. So look out for that video. Thank you for watching. Just my opinion, by the way. You can have your opinion if you like. I'm just really bummed out, and I'm going to end it right here. So peace out, guys. Hope you all have a good night.